The impeachment trial of Donald J. Trump. With more than enough Republican votes for acquittal, could this prosecution help more than hurt the president come November? Elsewhere in the nation's capital, Mr. Trump moves to funnel federal dollars to faith-based organizations. Will closing the gap between church and state survive court challenge and energize evangelicals? And here at home, backlash against the governor's ban on foreign refugees. Is it right for mostly Christian Texas to slam the door on folks persecuted for their beliefs? I'm Greg Groogan, and welcome to Watch Your Point, where our panelists call it like they see it. Let's greet them. Now, first up, longtime Fox 26 legal and political analyst Chris Tritico. In the two-spot, businessman, columnist, and former candidate Bill King. Batting cleanup, longtime super neighborhood leader Tomaro Bell. Next up, conservative attorney and Second Amendment expert Michele Maples. And closing us out on the hot corner, writer, educator, and radio host Antonio Diaz. Let's begin. Criminal charges, a jury of 167 votes needed for conviction. For just the third time in American history, a sitting president will stand trial in the United States Senate. Now, regardless of the evidence, an acquittal is a near certainty. Guilt or innocence in the trial of Donald J. Trump will be determined by partisan allegiance. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has confirmed as much, saying this is a political process. There's not anything judicial about it. Perhaps all involved would be well served to consider the words of the great Barbara Jordan.
My faith in the Constitution is whole, it is complete, it is total. And I am not going to sit here and be an idle spectator to the diminution, the subversion, the destruction of the Constitution.
When proceedings begin in earnest Tuesday, it doesn't appear Democrats will be able to muster the simple majority necessary to subpoena additional witnesses like Lev Parnas, the indicted Ukrainian-American operative deployed by Rudy Giuliani on behalf of the president. Parnas has turned over documents and texts he claims prove Mr. Trump was fully aware of the shadow diplomacy launched to pressure Ukraine to investigate Joe and Hunter Biden. Republicans quickly countered, calling Parnas' claim a false accusation based on the word of a soon-to-be convicted criminal. I want to start our conversation with Bill King. As you watch this go down, the sides are split. It is a partisan vote.
Yeah, I think the interesting question would be, can they get the votes to call the witnesses? And it doesn't look like they're going to be able to. I think the Republicans, and Chris will back me up on this, the old trial lawyer's adage, that you never ask a question you don't know the answer to. And I think that they're really afraid of what Bolton and some of these other witnesses might say if they got up there. So I think it's going to be a kabuki theater. I think they're going to not call the witnesses. It's going to be a straight party line vote, and this will all be over in a week or so. And then the question is, what's the political fallout from it? Let's see what Mr. Tritico has to say. I mean, we know what the outcome is going to be.
No question. He's going to be acquitted by the Senate unless something major happens. But there's two things I think that are important here. First, we now know why Nancy Pelosi didn't send the articles of impeachment to the Senate, because they were working with Lev Parnas to get all that shored up before they sent it over there. I think that's the real reason why she delayed sending it over there. But this idea about calling witnesses, for months and months and months, we've heard Mitch McConnell say there's no due process in what the House is doing. Where's the due process? And now at the 11th hour, he's saying this is a political process because he doesn't want it to be a judicial process, because if he did that, they would have to call those witnesses and give the president actually the due process he's been screaming about for over a year.
Michele Maples, should the American jury, that's all of us citizens, get a chance to hear Lev Parnas cross-examined by Senate Republicans?
Yes and no. So I think most Americans are done and they are over this entire political theater, right? And now at, as Chris was saying, the 11th hour, Parnas has come out of the woodwork with all of these texts. Where have you been for the past 6 months, man? If you've got all of this incriminating evidence, why weren't you brought in front of the Judicial Committee to testify? I mean, and that would have been a very safe space for him to testify because there was no cross-examination. And so the fact that they are trying to railroad him in now, it just all seems so fishy and hollow.
Okay, Tony Diaz, we posed the question, does this trial help or hurt the president in November? And that's really the big question here.
Well, that is the big question. And really, what's at stake is very simple. Can the president do whatever he feels like he wants to do? That's really it. Does he have unmitigated power? The answer is no. And we're about to see how our senators respond to this. So the political fallout, if you want to make this political, let's do that. How will John Cornyn, who's up for election in November, how will he respond to this evidence? Because to me, it's straightforward that the president has abused his power. And I want to see how he responds because we need to hold him, John Cornyn, accountable for if he puts the Constitution first and if he's going to let other presidents do what they want. The scary thing to me is this looks like Turkey, where you had Erdogan, who was elected democratically, slowly chip away at different powers. This is what socialist dictators do. They malign the media. They basically disrupt all constitutional apparatus, and they do what they want. So that's really what's at stake to me. I think the American public is going to respond in November the right way and put law and order back into the White House.
Tomaro Bell, I felt compelled to include Barbara Jordan quote because we know where her heart was. What do you think of this process? Brass tacks, it could hurt the Democrats.
What I agree with and what I disagree with. This is not about who gets elected. This is about the Constitution. Do we value it? Is there an individual who could come forth in this, 200-plus-year-old country and override the Constitution? Is there anybody walking, coming, can be born that can say the Constitution is irrelevant to me? No. I don't care if your name starts with a T, a R, a U, a M, and a P. Nobody overrides the Constitution. That's what's at stake. Is that still the law of the land? Is that still what guides us? Is that still what protects us? That's what's at stake.
Chris Tritico, hypothetical. You had a level playing field here. Which side would you want to take as an attorney?
Oh, I would love to prosecute Donald Trump on this. Not because of my political affiliation, but the facts lay out so well. I think I would rather be on the prosecution side if the Senate asked me what I wanted to do. But as a trial lawyer, I could always find a way to defend it too.
Okay, Michele Maples, as the only other, one of 3 attorneys on the panel, would you prefer to defend the president if given the opportunity?
Oh, absolutely. I don't think I could prosecute this case with a straight face, but as attorneys, we say a bunch of silly stuff with a straight face to judges. But with this one, the facts are so obvious. Aid was not withheld. It was sent. In fact, more was sent than by previous administrations. There's been no crime. They brought this obstruction of Congress claim because he asserted his executive privilege, which is what other administrations have done as well. It's all just silly at this point.
Real quick.
Aid was not withheld, it was given. That's like saying I shot you, but I did take you to the hospital. Okay, aid was withheld. It was eventually given, yes. It was held up, yes. I'm gonna let you bleed, and then I'll get you that. Yeah, come on.
Real quick, Bill, do you detect abuse of power here?
I think what he did was an abuse of power. However, I'm not sure that's an impeachable offense. The framers left this intentionally vague. Treason, other high crimes and misdemeanors, those are not defined at all. And look, if you start talking about people that abuse their office, we probably have to impeach a whole lot of folks.
I am certain this will not be our last conversation. Okay, now we're going to go to our next topic. We're going to talk about separation of church and state and whether the Trump administration is slowly whittling that away. So stay with us. Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Critical clauses of the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which have, over time, generated for this country a strenuous balancing act. That said, President Trump is making some very high-profile moves to reduce the current separation between church and state. This week, Mr. Trump said government must not stand between the people and God, a statement aimed at protecting the ability of students to openly pray at public schools, if they wish. In addition, Mr. Trump has proposed rule changes which would allow faith-based entities to qualify for a whole range of federal education funding programs. The ACLU called the moves hype, and congressional critics accused the president of pandering to evangelicals ahead of the fall election. Wayne Dolcefino, legendary reporter,
Late.
media.
Yep. Get him, Chris.
First of all, who runs at 6 o'clock in the morning? I mean, I don't understand that. But anyway, let's talk about silliness, okay? Silliness is that when the founding fathers came here, right, all they really wanted to do was keep government from telling people what religion to practice, okay? I think Mr. Tritico knows that too, okay? We have bastardized this thing over the years to start taking like, look, Moses is inside the, you ever been to the Capitol building in Washington? Greg, you have, you're a stud, right? Moses is in there, right? I mean, this notion that we have to like make everything atheist now to please like 1.0019% of somebody is ridiculous.
Okay, Tony, who's an expert on Hispandering, do we see pandering to the evangelical community?
This proves that Donald Trump is a pro at quid pro quo, because he learned from 2016 that certain electorates from the evangelical base will overlook moral transgressions that in the past would have disqualified a long list of candidates as long as they get something in exchange. And I'm not saying that's bad or good. That's obviously a play again. It worked for him before. And now he's appealing to evangelicals and making them think that there is a transgression against freedom of speech. I want to make something clear. I am all for freedom of speech, but that protection, it goes both ways. It really wants to keep the government out of religion completely, but he is pandering to the religious base so that he gets reelected because he's scared he's going to get reelected. He's not going to get reelected for all his shenanigans up in the White House.
Okay, we're going to continue this debate after the break, so please stay with us. Welcome back as we continue our debate over the president's move to expand the freedom of religious expression in schools and open federal funding to faith-based organizations. You like that idea, Tomaro?
Listen, a couple of weeks ago, he got his first open criticism from a very well-known evangelical magazine ran by the Billy Graham a religious organization, and he took that hard. He took that hard because that was the first time openly he had been criticized. Am I surprised he's doing this? Absolutely not. He's got to try to get this back because those are people he do need to vote for him.
Bill King, is this a slippery slope, so to speak, from a constitutional perspective?
Let me say, I disagree with something Tony said, which is the Constitution requires the government to stay completely out of religion. That's really not what the Constitution says. The Constitution says we're not going to establish a religion for the country like England had at the time, which was the Anglican Church at the time. So I think that this has been a tension within the country forever about how far do we go down this road. That we're never going to have a complete separation. You know, for example, we have Methodist Hospital here, which is associated with Methodist Church. Can they not participate in Medicare and Medicaid because they're a faith-based organization? I mean, we've got to have some common sense to this. Now, I think what Trump did was political without question, and I want to say this actually, the criticism he got from the organization that Billy Graham founded is not the first. There's been a growing dissent within the evangelical movement against this sort of Faustian bargain that the evangelical community has made with Trump. And it'll be interesting how that plays out in the 2020 election.
Okay, Michele Maples, is the ability to pray in school openly just one step removed from openly proselytizing in school?
I don't think so. So the law has not changed here. Since 1962, students have been able to pray in school in their free time. So it's not like the teacher is getting up and saying, okay, we all have to pray to Jesus Christ, or we have to pray to Allah, or whatever, because of the establishment clause that was being spoken about. Like, you cannot promote one religion over another, and that's not happening here. What the government is saying is that you can pray in your free time to whomever you want. Now, I think the more interesting part of this is the federal funding. And actually, back in 2017, there was a Supreme Court case on this exact issue. So it's already the law. So in that specific case, the Supreme Court said, hey, you cannot deny federal funding to a religious institution if the only reason you're denying funding is because they are a religious institution. And so this is just sort of putting the nail in that coffin that this is the law. Okay. And nothing is really changing.
Chris Tritico, you've represented school districts. Do you think they're on alert now that they could be competing with faith-based entities for education dollars.
Well, they've been doing that for a while, but yes, and when you open up the federal funding to faith-based organizations, it's going to take away from a school district and other people like that. But that's really not really the total issue here. The First Amendment is what it is, and you have a whole body of Supreme Court law that says here's how we're going to do this. The beauty of our Constitution is that in the First Amendment and in the Bill of Rights is it's fluid, and you can look at it today and say this is really, and people hate when I say this is the mood of the country, and this is where we're going to be looking at this. Governments for years, the state of Texas, extremely conservative government as opposed to an extremely liberal state, has two different ways of looking at this. It's a piece of litigation that's going to go on the rest of our lives. It's gone on the entire time we've had the First Amendment. But the last point I want to make is this new thing from Donald Trump about what we're going to do here, I think is absolutely right. He's trying to get the evangelicals back, and he must have learned that by reading 2 Corinthians.
We'll see. We'll see if it works. Still ahead, the first major clash in the war to control the Texas House is being fought in Fort Bend County. With early voting in HD 28 just days away, we'll talk about the battle that's attracting big names and big bucks, so stick around. Welcome back. Early voting gets underway this week in the special election for Texas House District 28. Most years this race would barely make it on our radar, but this is no ordinary year. HD 28 is seen as the opening battleground for a Democratic bid to regain control of the lower chamber. As a result, Dr. Liz Markowitz has drawn the endorsement of 4 different past or current presidential candidates, including Beto O'Rourke. You've refocused your energy on turning Texas blue with an emphasis on the critical Texas House of Representatives, where the margin is just 9 seats. Why is that so important?
If we were able to win control of the Texas House for the first time since 2001, and to do it in 2020, a census year, then we can draw more fair maps so that more people are included in our democracy, and we end the gerrymandering that exists. We can make progress on gun violence, confront climate change before it's too late, and ensure that more people have health care in the least insured state in the country.
Markowitz faces Republican Gary Gates, with both candidates slated to join us for hot seat appearances next week. I know you can hardly wait, Wayne. What do you think of this? Can they take 28?
You know what? They might. And look, the demographics are completely changing. They really are. And I think with that there are political changes. But, Beto O'Rourke really scares me. You know who scares me more? Joe Biden. Because Joe Biden thinks Beto O'Rourke is Hispanic.
Okay. Tony Diaz is Hispanic. So what do you think? You think the Democrats are going to take this?
Definitely. And I also think it's exciting that I commend Beto because he gave up his campaign for president, and instead of running for another office, he's actually sharing his political capital to help other folks win. I think that's a commitment, and he's a true leader, and I think that's going to help turn a lot of these seats blue because he really changed up the whole ball game. Now, I am mad at some of the voter suppression. There's a group called Center for Voter Information. They are their own nonprofit. They're sending out letters to folks with Spanish surnames and pretending that they may or may not be able to vote. And they're saying things like, if you're not a U.S. citizen, you cannot register to vote. Garbage like this is what got Abbott in trouble. We want to make sure Maldiff is at the bottom of this. Voter suppression is real. They need to stop it. The Latino vote will deliver the next president of the United States of America. So come to our community and represent right.
Bill King is 28 and CD 22. Is it shifting blue, or you think it's still going to remain in the Republican column?
This is a runoff, so they're almost impossible to predict because the turnout will be non-existent. Right. But in the first round, which in Texas when we run for replace a seat, you don't run. There's party identification, but you can't vote straight RD. So in that race, there were a bunch of Republicans that ran, and then Markowitz was the only Democrat. The Republicans combined got about 60% of the vote. So if those folks come back out, the Republicans will win. But the other interesting thing about this is Markowitz is from the education establishment. She's against STAR testing and all that. And so if she's able to motivate a lot of teachers to go vote, that could be the difference in the race.
Real quick, Tomaro, you think the Democrats have the upper hand out there?
No, I believe that they're gaining. I definitely believe they're gaining. Anybody who says 4 years ago the Democrats are the same, they're wrong. And what was the chart changer for all of this was Harvey. People have had to move to areas where they never lived before because where they were got flooded. So like Bill said, if she energizes her base and gets the educators, this can be flipped.
20 seconds for you and you. You go first.
Well, I think that this is going to be a tighter race than people think. The education aspect of that is really good for Markowitz, but it's a pretty conservative part of the area, and so that probably gives the Republicans a leg up.
Okay, close us out, Michele Maples.
The incumbent is a Republican, and like Bill said, if those Republicans who came out on Election Day come back out during the runoff, I think the seat will stay red. And if you're making any of your decisions on who to vote for based on Robert Francis O'Rourke, you have bigger problems.
Ooh, okay, we're going to leave it right there. Coming up, he's the former Navy SEAL turned outspoken Republican Congressman Dan Crenshaw returns to our hot seat to talk impeachment, Iran, and trade deals. Welcome back. It's hard to believe Dan Crenshaw has served in the U.S. Congress for just a little more than a year. To say the Republican representing CD2 has made his presence known is an understatement. And with that introduction, we welcome him back to the hot seat. Dan Crenshaw, thanks for being here.
Yeah, great to be here.
Okay, Congressman, you have been a vocal critic of this impeachment and a vocal supporter of the president. At a fundamental level, why do you believe the president did not abuse his power?
Well, it comes down to one question. There's a lot of complexity associated with this case. There's a lot of narratives that have been spun. It always comes down to one question. Why can't the president ask about an inherently corrupt relationship between Biden and Burisma? He wasn't asking the Ukrainians about Bernie. He wasn't asking about Elizabeth Warren. He was asking about a specific situation where Biden threatened to withhold American aid because they were going to, unless they fired a prosecutor that was prosecuting a company that his son was a board member on. That's a bad conflict of interest. Everybody agrees on those facts. So why can't we ask about that? And if you believe that that's wrong, then they move forward with impeachment. But it's hard to argue that that's the wrong thing to do, and it's hard to argue that that should be the premise for a very weak impeachment case.
So you don't believe he purposely withheld the aid and that was a transgression?
Yeah. Well, the aid was clearly delayed and then released, okay, so that we know that. The question is why, and it turns out there's a number of reasons. There was a new Ukrainian government. In U.S. law, we're not supposed to, there's actually specific U.S. law that says do not release aid unless they have met certain parameters or you have, as the executive, you have decided that the Ukrainians have addressed corruption correctly. President Trump was concerned about a number of other things too, including Ukrainian officials interfering in the 2016 election. Not the way the Russians did. We're not making that case. I know that gets spun sometimes. But they were outspoken against the president, and he was concerned about that and other issues of corruption. So there's a whole package of reasons. You know, he wanted to understand, I think, what this new government was going to do and who they really were, what kind of relationship they would have with the U.S. And you know, so it's very difficult to make the case that it was a specific quid pro quo for the 2020 election. There's just zero evidence of that. And because there's no evidence of that, it's a weak case for impeachment.
I got to ask you this because, you know, there's so much talk about partisanship. But if the same set of facts were aimed at a Democratic president, would you feel just as strongly? Would you buck your party and step up and say, I think this is wrong? Yeah,
well, we can look at some history here. In 2017, multiple Democrat senators sent a letter to the Ukraine saying that if they didn't investigate Trump, if they didn't help with the Mueller investigation, they would try and withhold aid to Ukraine. So literally the exact same thing happened just a couple of years ago. None of us raised any flags about it. You look at the Steele dossier, right? This is the Democratic Party using foreigners to dig up dirt on a political opponent. So the exact same thing. You know, now we definitely raised flags over, but nobody's talking about jail time or impeachment or anything like that. So, you know, we can actually be pretty objective about this and say that no, that if the shoe was on the other foot, this is not how we would do business.
Dan Crenshaw, you lived, fought, and ultimately suffered life-altering wounds in the Middle East. Why was the president's decision to take out Soleimani the right call?
Right call for a number of reasons. One, he's one of the most active terrorists in the world. Look at Baghdadi, look at Osama bin Laden. When we took them out, they weren't really planning anything new. We were taking them out because of everything they'd done to us. Well, Soleimani's also done a lot to us. Over 600 American deaths are as a direct result of Soleimani, thousands more across the region. And we know, we have good intel that they were planning much bigger attacks within days. So there really was imminent attacks going on. I know you've heard a lot in the news that Democrats saying that's not true. It is absolutely true. I've spoken with at the highest levels, and that was absolutely true. And we needed to address that. But even if that wasn't happening, we had to disrupt the escalation of violence that the Iranians were doing. They had just killed an American. They had just orchestrated an attack on our base. They had a systematic escalation against the United States. And at one point, you have to draw a red line and disrupt that. And that's exactly what happened with the killing of Soleimani.
Congressman, overshadowed this week by the impeachment proceedings, two developments critical to the economy, Senate approval of the U.S.-Mexico Trade Pact, as well as the signing of the Phase 1 deal with China. Looking ahead to the fall, as Americans vote on a direction for the country, should the economy and these trade deals be a big factor?
This is going to be a really great thing for our economy over the coming year. We've been waiting a long time to get Democrats to agree to the USMCA. They finally gave in. They never had a good reason to be against it. This has been one of the most frustrating issues all year long. But yeah, we're finally signing it. Democrats did add a few provisions in there that weren't so great. I could get into those, but I'd need more time. But this China deal is something that I believe is a bit underreported. It is a really great thing. Here's basically what's happening. We're reducing tariffs, which means for the American consumer, basically your taxes go down. Effectively, your prices go down. And we're increasing our exports because China's agreed to buy over $200 billion more of U.S. goods, to include $50 billion in energy. So who's that good for? Our great city of Houston. So this is going to be great for Texas. It's going to be great for the United States, and it's going to seek to balance our trade with China. Also, a lot of other commitments by China to protect intellectual property and things like that. So, it was tough living through these tariffs. I mean, I was critical of using tariffs as this blunt tool to get a better deal on trade, but I have to admit now it's turned out pretty good.
Dan Crenshaw, thanks for coming back to the hot seat. Hope you'll come back again.
Thanks for having me, Greg.
Still ahead, serious blowback against Governor Greg Abbott's call to shut our state's door on refugees. We're going to talk about it right after the break. Welcome back. A federal judge has blocked, at least temporarily, the Trump administration policy which enabled Texas Governor Greg Abbott to ban resettlement of refugees in the Lone Star State. Leading the ferocious backlash against the ban, all 16 Catholic bishops in Texas, who collectively called Abbott's decision deeply discouraging and disheartening, and a misguided denial of sanctuary for innocent people fleeing religious persecution. The governor defended his decision, claiming all available resources should be dedicated to the refugees who've already been allowed to settle here. Bill King has been wanting to talk about this all week.
Oh, yeah. Let me say, first of all, I read the judge's decision, and I'm not very impressed with his legal reasoning. I think it's likely to be overturned on appeal. But let me just talk about this refugee program, because this is widely misunderstood. This has absolutely nothing to do with what's going on the border. These are people from all over the world that apply for refugee status here. They're not in the United States. They're outside the United States when they apply. They're vetted by the State Department. It's a very small program. Last year, 27,000 people were admitted under this program. Before Trump, the average was about 50,000. He's cut it back a little bit. Last year, 80% of those admitted were Christians fleeing prosecution in places where they're being slaughtered. Most of them came last year from the Congo. By the way, of the 27,000, about 10% were Catholics fleeing persecution, which I think is one of the reasons you see the bishops reacting like this. This is misguided. I don't know where Greg got his information or his advice on this, but he needs to reconsider this.
What do you think, Wayne?
No, look, I think Bill is exactly right. I mean, I think we can look, but it's part of a problem we have in this country. People are stupid. Okay, nobody pays attention. I'm sorry, I hate to be rude. Okay, a lot of people have no clue what's going on in their government, so they hear refugees and they think the problem on the border. Look, I am basically like an American guy. I believe like we should worry about Americans, actually people who are citizens right here. But there is the need to allow people who are being really persecuted, not just broke, to come here.
Michele Maples, I'm trying to figure out why the governor did this.
Well, this is legal immigration, right? And if we're going to have the immigration chat, these are the people who need to come to this country to flee the persecution that Bill was mentioning. However, let's keep in mind that Texas has been the highest resettlement state since 2010, right? We also, separate is the crisis at the border. And I think Greg Abbott took a look at his budget, and the resources are just spread too far. And that there are 49 other states who can also take these individuals, that perhaps we take the burden off Texas and spread the wealth a little bit.
Okay,
we are
real quick. And
we took 8% of the refugees in this program. Not talking about all the other refugee stuff that's on the board. I'm talking about this program. We took 8%. We have 8% of the nation's population. We're actually the second. California took a few more than we did. And this uses absolutely no state resources. The State Department gives some money, but this is mostly supported by local faith organizations like Catholic Charities, interfaith ministries who adopt these people. 90% of them are self-sufficient within 6 months.
Bill took your time. I'm sorry.
I was going to give it to him.
Up next, a very serious development in the academic dishonesty case against a former Katy ISD superintendent. Stay with us. Watch your point. We'll be right back. A new development on a topic we followed closely on What's Your Point. Fox 26 has learned the doctoral dissertation of former Katy ISD Superintendent Lance Hint has been removed from the University of Houston's archival website. Hint, you will remember, resigned back in 2018 amid allegations he lied about violence and bullying in his past and lifted material from his dissertation from a scholarly paper published years before at Liberty University. Citing privacy restrictions, will not reveal whether its 18-month investigation ended in sanctions or exoneration. However, does confirm the university only takes down graduate-level papers when copyright violations, plagiarism, or falsification of data has been discovered. Now, neither Hint nor his lawyer have responded to our request for comment. Let me repeat, we do not know yet whether Hint's doctoral degree has been retracted, but his critics believe their allegations have been confirmed.
I think it's pretty clear by the fact that he's not doing a victory lap, an exoneration parade. He's not coming to the media, clearing his name.
Now, this latest revelation in Katy has some people saying the district should attempt to retrieve the $750,000 payout it awarded Hint when he voluntarily quit his job. Chris Tritico, I want to get your take on this.
Well, I think his silence and the fact that the dissertation has been pulled down are clear evidence that they confirmed that the allegation was true. And I agree with whoever that was just then. If he'd have won this thing and they'd have cleared him, he'd be all over the media with it. And the fact that he won't make a statement, I think is pretty good circumstantial evidence that he lost that appeal.
Tomaro Bell, quickly.
Look, you can tell by his cocky attitude that if he had won, as Chris said, he would be all over that 99999. But he didn't. He know he had plagiarized. He did get caught. They wouldn't have taken the paper down had they not found out that he had. So that's why he's not saying anything. And as far as the $750,000, why would Katy give him that much anyway?
Wayne Dolcefino used to live out in Katy. You know the players here.
Oh yeah, all of them. In spirit of full disclosure, I was helping a law firm for a while try to convince Hint to do the right thing, which he didn't. And you know why he didn't? Because Hint is a symptom of a problem. School districts, big school districts, Tritico knows this, big school districts don't think they're the government. They think they're some separate entity out in the world and can do what they want and not listen to the public. The arrogance in that school district among the school board members who think they're so much smarter than everyone else is symptomatic of why HISD is now destroyed, okay? Because they don't listen to the public.
Okay, Tony, academic dishonesty, a very big deal. Professor Diaz.
Correct.
English teachers across Texas now have a perfect lesson plan to teach students why they should not plagiarize and steal other people's ideas and should cite appropriately according to the MLA. We mentioned HISD. I'm really offended by this golden parachute that mediocre to corrupt superintendents have, because working class folks, when you get fired or when you screw up, you're out on the street. You don't get 750 G's. And this reminds me of HISD. Terry Greer. Terry Greer had a golden parachute too, and he left with his money and he left HISD in a mess that needs to be fixed.
30 seconds for each of you. King.
Listen, I've got a problem with these golden parachutes also. The average taxes that a house pays in Katy for a school district is about $1,000 a year. And so 750 families, taxes for an entire year went to fund this. This is the problem here is people don't show up for school board elections, and they need to start showing up.
Final word, Michelle.
This is a reason to get involved in your own community. All politics are local, and when you don't show up and you're not educated on the issues on who you're voting in, this is what you get.
You don't vote.
Okay, we're going to leave it there. Coming up, the latest Democratic debate and the ugly rift between one-time buds Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders. Stick around. We won't be gone long. There was no blood, not during the debate anyway. This week, the whittled down field of Democratic contenders met on a stage in Des Moines and essentially made nice right up until the very end when Elizabeth Warren refused to shake the hand of her one-time philosophical ally, Bernie Sanders, and then said this.
I think you called me a liar on national TV.
What?
I think you called me a liar on national TV.
Let's not do it right now. You want to have that discussion, we'll have that discussion. You called me, you told me. All right, let's not do it now.
I don't want to get in the middle of it. I just want to say hi, Bernie.
Yeah, good.
Okay, no question. Open hostilities are clearly underway in pursuit of the progressive wing of the party, led by Tony Diaz. What's going on there, Tony?
All right, let's get something clear. At least Bernie Sanders, I'm glad he didn't call her Pocahontas, like Donald Trump has and Donald Trump will. And he's in this quagmire because he may have said that he doesn't think a woman can win president at this time. I'm going to flip the script. I don't think a nice guy can win president at this time. And what Elizabeth Warren showed on that stage is she's cutthroat. And I think she also wants people to see that she can go mano a mano with any older Anglo fellow like Bernie or be Trump. So we're going to see if people like this or not in Iowa, see how this plays. I think it's on, and all the gloves are off, and that's a good thing for the Democrats.
Michelle, you had to be giggling.
I can't
Still
stop.
is.
So Elizabeth Warren has a propensity to over-exaggerate. I don't think Bernie Warren would have ever said something like a woman will never be or could not be elected president. He's smarter than that, and nor do I believe that he truly believes that. But as we see, Sanders is out polling Warren. And so she had to do something wild like say, you said a woman could never get elected. And this is just her trying to separate herself from him because she's losing.
Brass tacks, Warren and Sanders folks have to come together at some point if they hope to pull off the nomination.
Yeah,
you agree?
Yeah, both of them are not going to get the nomination. Actually, neither one of them might not get the nomination. But I think Warren made a huge calculated error there by not shaking his hand. And bringing that up right in front of those cameras. You shake his hand, later on you call him, and then you have that discussion. Bernie Sanders was right.
Go, Wayne.
That's right. If you ever watch the end of the show, I always get up and hug Tony, even though I think he's insane.
Against my will. Don't touch me.
But I always hug them, okay? But look, I don't want to venture into like gender territory, God forbid. But I actually think when a woman does that, that I think she comes off as sort of mean-spirited is another word for it, but I won't use it.
Okay, Bill King, the target of some mistruths perhaps in some of your debates. What did you think of this encounter?
Well, I for a long time I've been very dismayed at the lack of civility in the political process. So I don't like this kind of stuff at all. I think politically that far left lane of the Democratic Party is fairly narrow. And obviously both of them can't get through, and so I think you're going to see that rivalry get worse as we go along. All of that benefits Biden. 15
seconds.
She missed my rule, never let him see you sweat. She should have shook his hand and cussed him out once they got to the back.
Yep. I like that. Coming up. Coping with the clear evidence, our Houston Astros broke the rules and broke them badly. Our team is set to talk about the path forward after this quick break. Welcome back now to the painful elephant sitting in nearly every Houston home, and this show for that matter. As much as we hate it, our Astros benefited from electronic sign stealing, which falls undeniably in the category of cheating. Manager A.J. Hinch fired, GM Jeff Lunau terminated. It stings pretty badly because the trade-off we all make with every committed relationship is vulnerability. If we didn't care, it wouldn't hurt. So when the haters call our guys the Houston Asterisks, and we're going to hear it a lot, it's a gut punch we all feel. I'm going to start with Bill King.
So I've got a quick personal privilege I want to announce. I want to tell everybody, give a shout out to my mom and dad, who tomorrow will have been married for 70 years.
That's awesome.
Very proud of them. Listen, this is it's unfortunate, but frankly, I would really like to see every team in Major League Baseball investigated to the extent the Astros were, because I cannot believe they're the only team that's been doing this.
Tomorrow.
I want to take a personal privilege to my friends from the country of Oman. The Sultan of Oman, Sultan Qaboos, our #1 ally in Oman, died last week, been a friend of the United States. It will make a difference. I promise you pay attention. And as far as the Astros go, this is why I took a personal privilege. I don't really care for baseball, but I am shying. I'm shying. I'm shying.
So you got to remember, while we're beating up on the Astros over this, they won 115 games on the road that year. And those wins didn't come with electronic monitoring of signs. And so that road to victory was still there anyway.
Okay, Michele Maples, real quick.
I think every team in baseball engages in this type of behavior, and the Astros got caught, and now they're being made an example. But I'm as loyal as a dog, and I'm still an Astro fan.
Yeah, way to go.
Still loving the Astros?
Still love the Astros. They got busted. They've been maligned. Let's make it fair, because let's stack it up. There's other whole scandals that have been a lot worse. So, for example, when the White Sox took bribes to throw the game, that's even worse. You had Cotto who got beat up by another boxer, Margarito, who put plaster in his gloves. So as long as you got humans, there are going to be problems like this, unless you want robots playing the ball game, which is not going to happen.
Okay, Wayne.
All right, look, it's not stealing a sign. Look, I'm a baseball guy, right? The catcher does this finger thing, right? And then people see it because he's not like hiding it, okay? He's like this, right? That's not stealing. If you see the person do it and then you tell someone else, that's not stealing. I have friends who are like, I'm so ashamed. It's like, really? Stop whining. Grow up. Everybody does it. Who cares?
What did Barry Switzer say? If you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. I'm not saying that.
Barry Switzer's right.
Okay, we got to leave it there. That's it for us today.